Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. See?
Yeah, I always do that.
Professional.
Well. Yeah.
So we are 15 miles from Launceston. I say we, I am 15 miles from Launceston. And the weather is vile. Unfortunately, the radio has decided, this car has decided, that it would be better for me not to have Bluetooth. So whenever I use the Bluetooth like that the whole time. The interesting thing about Mr. Baccus is that he trained under both Andy and Hugh Manson. The two brothers, Andy was the one that made the acoustics and Hugh was the one that did all the electric. And they both made some pretty incredible things. The giant mermaid statue that Andy made that was a guitar. All of Hugh's crazy 80s stuff with active circuitry and brass everything and these hand-tooled bridges and Seth, much like my good self, we both worked at Manson's for extended periods. Seth was the shop manager there, and he was working there with Tim Stark, now at Manson's Works, when I first moved to Exeter. It'd be nice to see his location, see his workshop, see him, and talk picks, talk guitars, have a chat of an acceptable nature, and then drive all the way back to Somerset, which is 3 hours. So yeah, it's going to be a long day, but we're good.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Heavy Repping. My name is John Tron Davidson, and I'm here for the first time in the lair of Mr. Seth Baccus of Baccus Guitars. Seth, welcome to
John.
the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to do I Rest My Case.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's reciprocal. We're deep in the misty area of kind of Falmouth, Gweek sort of place.
South Cornwall,
right out in the sticks, which is lovely. And I've brought my case along so that Mr. Baccus can test all of our accoutrements. But before we get into that, for the people who are not aware of your endeavours, how long have you been building, and how did you get into it, and all that sort of stuff?
Well, this is actually my 20th year guitar making, and my 27th year in the industry in general. And we have a bit of shared background that I used to work at Manson's Guitar Shop in the late 90s to 2009-ish. And my stepfather is Andy Manson, so I've been surrounded by guitars, since I was like 6 years old, basically. And yeah, it's all I've ever done.
That is rather wonderful. And we've got evidence behind us and all around us of Seth's activity, and a huge pile of wood that you can't see off camera, which is full fingerboards and bodies and all manner of things. Obviously we're here about picks today, and I know you are a Dunlop 88 man. Have you always used those?
Yes. Like
since day dot?
Certainly as early as I can remember, yeah. It's that combination of gives a little bit but stiff as well, and I always use the satin finished ones, so you have a bit of grip on them. And actually, funnily enough, I think that came from Matt Bellamy. It's probably where I nicked that idea from, on the 88s. Yeah, and that's what he always used to use.
I think he's switched now to 73s.
Oh yeah.
But I guess that's because.
Oh, I beg my pardon. Yeah. You're right. It's the 73s he used to use. I used to use 73s for years, and then when I had my own picks made, I switched to 88s and used the slightly different material.
Yeah.
It's the Delrin, sort of matte Delrin rather than the Tortex.
Yeah.
And that was probably, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. So yeah, you're bang right. Yeah.
And if I am right in saying this, because I've got a couple of your picks at home, I think they're done more in the old Grover Allman style rather than the Dunlop style, so they get slightly higher shoulders and they're more tapered towards the bottom.
Yeah, you know your stuff.
Which is a very cool thing to do. That's very contemporary.
Yeah. They're made by Grover Allman.
Yeah.
So yeah,
they're really cool. If you could break down for our dear viewers in the internet land, you've worked with a few notable people. Are there any that kind of stand out in that?
Players, you mean?
Yeah.
One of my first clients when I went out on my own was Alan Johannes, who you might know from Queens of the Stone Age and 11 and all kinds of other things around that sort of scene. And he has a Nautilus kind of custom build. And that was like one of those, you know, early in your career, and it just gives you the confidence to kind of, you know, push on with it. If I don't know, you know, how well any of you know Al, but I would look him up because he's incredible and he can play anything, any instrument, any style, just a phenomenal musician. So yeah, if someone like that is kind of, you know, gives you a green flag, then it was wonderful. And then yeah, various people along the way as well. I do a lot of stuff with Chris Barris. He's kind of local to us in the southwest, but out there sort of gigging all over the world. A wonderful guitar player and songwriter and vocalist. And we were just talking about Danish Pete. Danish Pete has one of my guitars. And yeah, lots of great players. Yeah,
we've discussed this. You're a man of taste, and you do like a baritone.
I do.
Now baritones are. I'm a baritone player, as you know. Mine's kind of lurking over in the corner there, but there's more baritone players now than there were. But what got you into making the baritones?
So about, I guess it was like 2009, a friend of mine asked me to make him a baritone guitar for a new record they were making. And I was like a little bit nervous for him because he'd never played a baritone guitar before. So I wanted to kind of make the guitar that if it turned out like it was a fad for him or, you know, something like that, that the guitar wasn't like redundant. So I actually made his baritone essentially with the possibility of converting it back to a standard scale length. So I have a 28.65 inch scale length, which is a 24 fret neck. And you can replace that with a 22 fret neck at a 25.5 inch scale length. Bridge stays exactly the same, pickups stay the same, you know.
Yeah.
It's quite a cool idea. I made one very similar a couple of years ago for a customer of mine who's in a band called El Muno, and they're like a sort of upcoming band, Brighton based, and they're kind of, I don't know, it's really hard to describe. I'm not very good at keeping up with like all the new ways of describing rock music because it's just rock music to me.
I know what you mean.
But they're sort of, I suppose, like sort of like a cross between more metally stuff but grungy but a bit psychedelic, like it's kind of vintage vibe but also like extremely contemporary. It's quite hard to explain. But he has an Argonaut baritone and it just works so well in that sort of musical pocket as well. It's really cool.
So this is the moment of truth. We are going to open the case. So I will let you do this, seeing as it's an exciting... If you can get through all the stickers, obviously. That's it right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an assortment.
Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, absolutely not. When I used to work in a guitar shop, guitar picks were guitar picks.
Yeah.
And this is like a whole other world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit like, the analogy I tend to use with people is, it's a bit like when I was growing up in Glasgow in the 90s, pedal boards were MXR, electro-harmonics, Boss, and nothing. And now it's totally normal for people to have, you know, a 13-strong pedal board for their first band full of all sorts of crazy things. You get extra points if you can identify any of the materials.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? There's so many points of interest. There's the shape, the material, the size, the thickness. Like all. I mean,
you found the cube.
I'll put that there just because I'm intrigued.
Everybody loves the cube.
So this is kind of become a classic shape, I suppose.
The home plate,
now.
yeah. Well, it used originally the Burt Whedon back in the day.
Yeah, learn how to play guitar in a day or something.
Yeah, and then it became Ritchie Blackmore.
Some nice wooden one.
And then people just started referring to it as the home plate.
Yeah, I mean the variety is amazing.
It's always interesting to me to see what people go for initially, because you're kind of going in not knowing. Yeah, that. I thought you'd appreciate that. That was My friend Steve at Raven Music. Actually, I'll move that up to the camera over here. My wonderful friend Steve at Raven made this for me, and it is every colour of Tortex glued together and beveled. It's quite an experience.
Okay, so I've picked out 6.
Cool. Well, we'll start there. So let me just very quickly I'll get my camera. Great. Right, sir. So you have chosen a Hufschmid.
Okay.
That's your Hufschmid.
The big one.
The big one. And then we've got an Arcanum Ranger, then a Zen Chris, then we have a Hendrix one-off. That is made of cork.
I thought so, yeah.
Don't play too aggressively with it or it'll disintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got a Killy Nonis Turbo and a WooDo W1M. All are handmade in various degrees. Pick them up and give them a roll. And we'll take it from there.
Start from this side then. Well, obviously I'm drawn to things made out of wood anyway, which is why that one got chosen. It feels really nice and comfortable in the hand and has a very distinct sound actually. Very soft attack. I could imagine, I don't know, like jazzers or, very sort of smooth, plummy type sort of feel to it. Could be laburnum or madron or something like that, I suppose. It's beautiful. It's really nice. But like I can hear, the difference. So this is just one of my standard Delrin picks. Has all that sort of attack and clickety clack. And that wooden pick sounds so different. It's amazing. I really like that. It's lovely.
This is Mr. Killy Nonis, who is you know him on a personal note, but he is a Macaferry guitar maker.
Yeah.
And also, in my humble opinion, makes some of the best picks in the scene. It is made from jade galolith. Oh, sorry, that's the pearl one. So it's pearl galolith with a brass Selmer tailpiece insert.
So
and
cool.
Stingray on the back.
Yeah, amazing.
You see the angles that he does here.
Yeah,
all the obliques.
that's what I'm just
so,
looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably not a good enough player to really appreciate the subtleties of the contouring.
Well, you do hold your picks quite high up as well.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah,
which is not wrong.
No,
it's
no.
just how you do it.
Yeah, no, I'm not like one of those guys.
But that will have an effect on, because a lot of those guys that are using those sorts of things, they tend to be all the gypsy guys, they tend to just have like a little stub.
I was going to ask,
and
yeah.
it's all because they're using those rigid strings on Macs. So it's
yeah.
always like loads of economy stuff.
Yeah.
So they're not going jack, 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 jack. It's more.
And the guitars themselves are built to have a very fast attack anyway. So, yeah. No, that's beautiful. It's beautifully made. And the shape's really comfy, isn't it? And so, like, obviously he builds them for gypsy jazz players primarily, but then you've ended up using one yourself so they can...
Yep. I think he was one of the first higher end guys. So I got in, it was Gravity V-Picks, Windspear, Dragon's Heart, BHL, and then I got into Killy stuff. And I just think his craft is incredible because they're all distinctive. There's other people making more, for want of a better term, practical plectrums, but in terms of that style, just he's a way over there. You know what I mean?
Just compare it to the...
Just get this, like, even on the pod, this like extra muscle.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's got the same sort of brightness and everything, but without that sort of clicky attack. That's really nice. And then this one's cork, right?
It's made of cork.
Wow.
Rens was a big fan of. Hello, Rens, if you're watching. Rens was a big fan of pushing the envelope a little bit with his design. So he did a lot of heavy marquetry work. So he did like He did a couple of picks in maple and walnut, but it was done in the like Ricky checkerboard work, and it was all like tiny little slots. And he's a thrash player for them.
Yeah, really. Wow.
Like thrash. But yeah, he wanted to see if it could be done.
And what's that cork, like stabilised in epoxy or something? Yep. Yeah.
I played with it briefly, but you can. I mean, it's cork. You hear that?
Yeah.
Right at the top.
Yeah.
That's because the material is not robust.
It doesn't sound quite how I thought it would actually.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds, I guess it's the epoxy that's making it hard.
Yep.
I would imagine it to be a bit spongier sounding, basically.
The problem is if you have, I've got some picks in. Well, the wedgie rubber is the one that comes to mind. But there's the problem with doing porous materials is that the biggest thing that they create as a problem for picks is drag.
Yeah.
So if you have an absorb, like the Ibanez Elastomer series is the ones that I've got it right. I think there's one in there somewhere. But basically, if you have a material that's got too much porosity to it, as it hits the strings, it's pulling. Yeah. And that's the one thing you don't want.
You don't. Yeah.
Nobody says I really like my picks because they're more work.
Yeah. You know. Yeah.
So it's just one of those. But it's really cool to see that it exists, and it's the only one. So I'm very pleased that I've got that.
Okay, and then
Zen, Mr. Duncan.
I that detail's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty fierce, isn't it?
I wouldn't even know how you would do that.
Yeah, the laser. I mean, I'm assuming it's laser work or CNC or something.
Too fine for CNC.
It's really, really fine detail, and Duncan's been doing that since I can remember. Really, he was one of the heavy ripping OGs in the shop.
And what material is that?
That is Kernite. Okay. So Kernite is hardened acrylic.
Okay.
Apart from the sound, because I'm curious with this, does the experience feel different when you're playing the string?
Yeah, I'm not used to using this sort of level of thickness like at all. But it doesn't feel as weird as you would think if you were that inexperienced, you know what I mean?
You heard it here first. It's not hard going past the 2 mil threshold. Be cool.
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly more comfortable and more natural than you might think, just holding them, you know? Yep. Yeah, nice sound as well.
So this is an Arcanum Ranger. You can buy these in the shop. And this is half resin, so it's resin at the top, which Dan makes himself, and then Tagua at the bottom, so it's vegetable ivory at the bottom. So that material, Tagua, is used a lot it comes primarily from places like Ecuador, but it's used as an ivory replacement in jewellery.
People use it in guitar making now as well as a replacement for bone, or if you're vegan, you don't want any animal products on your instruments, you can use them for making nuts and saddles and that kind of thing as well. Yeah, nice sound, that one. That's really nice. Do you find, I've never really used a metal pick, do you find they get through strings quicker?
Well, this is one of those sort of myths about heavy picks.
That's what I was wondering.
And rigid things. So, in our experience as both guitar-centric people, and my being in shops and stuff, my experience has always been that the primary string breakage causes are burrs at the bridge, burrs at the tuner end, the nut not being cut properly, or bad strings. Yeah. Or old strings.
Yeah.
I have been playing heavy picks for the last 10 years exclusively, nothing under 2 mil really, and I never break strings. So it is.
Do you find it affects string life in any way, like longevity?
It depends on what it is. I mean, things like if you're playing with stone for example. We've got some stone in here. That's Speckled Gem from Stone Age. That's Rainbow Agate. So if you play with this, if you're playing, what you would notice is if you were playing with elixirs, for example,
the
or Dodario XTs,
yeah,
anything with coating on, you will notice that the string will start to de-thread a little earlier because it's harder on the coating.
That's what I was wondering.
But in terms of the actual string itself, not really.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. That's one of my favourites he's made, to be honest. And it was that led to these. So this is the one we designed together. That's the Warlock, and that's the Paladin. I think the Paladin's a masterpiece, to be honest.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
You're gonna give the big boy a go.
Gosh, it's so counterintuitive. And what's that made out of?
So it's made of a material called Huftech, which is a variant of, I believe, a variant of UHMWPE, which is ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, which sounds very fancy.
Yeah.
But basically what it is, it's a self-lubricating plastic.
Yeah.
It's used in things like spinal surgery. So if you have a bone that needs replaced in your back, that's what they use, because it's incredibly hard wearing and self-lubricating. So for people who've got... It's hydrophobic as well. So if you have sweaty hands or clammy hands, like our friend Jeremy, that works perfectly.
That feels different.
Well, that is a full 10 millimeters. So that's you into double figures for the first time.
It does sound quite nice though, I have to say.
Yeah.
Is it for, like, because obviously I think his guitars is kind of more modern minded guitars, aren't they?
Yeah.
Is that the idea of this as well?
There's two sides to this. So
Like,
that's exactly the if you're not making that face.
Yeah, you're not doing it. Yeah.
A lot of the guys that play his guitars and his picks do tend to play a lot of fleet fingered stuff.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the style. But also, the thicker you go, if you think about it this way, if we use your pick as an example, so with a little 0.8 like this, in order to get a grip, you have to be here, right? And because there's no, although you have debossed your logo and everything, which gives an element of grip to it, it's not a full surface grip, right? So there is an element of that moving about.
Yeah.
With this, the idea is that the thicker you go, the less force you've got to put in to hold it, because there's simply so much more mass. So a lot of people who get into these sorts of things, they've had hand injuries, or they've got nerve damage, or they just don't have a great grip. Like, I don't grip my picks super. I used to when I was younger, but it gave me wrist problems. So I don't grip my picks super hard. I've got quite a loose grip on them, which is why it's so important that you choose the right material, because then if you get the right material, it'll stick to your fingers. If you get the wrong material, like this thing, this is a Superbite. Well, the company's called Superbite. This is made of Teflon, so this feels like a bar of soap.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, everybody hates that. But which is a great shame, because actually Teflon, Ace Performance Picks, who's also in the shop, he's a big fan of Teflon.
Well, I guess
and the sound off it is amazing.
Right.
But it just feels like you either get on with it or you don't. There's no middle ground.
Presumably that's the point of the hole and the countersink, is to give you something to hold on to.
But you feel how quickly it's going through the strings.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to... Yeah, not my...
One day...
It just feels weird.
One day that will be the bride and not the bridesmaid.
It's so hard to get used to the size of it.
The thing is, you have now gone in... Once you've hit double figures, you'll go back to this stuff, which is way heavier than anything you've ever used.
Absolutely.
And it'll feel tiny.
Yeah, that feels like a nice normal size now, but that's actually...
About 3.5.
Yeah, it's thick, isn't it? Yeah. Fascinating.
So what I've done is I have selected a couple of things for you. I'll move that over and I'll leave your pick there for reference. This is an Ace Performance Force Push. It's about 7mm, but it's tapered. This plastic, you should know, this was my main pick for 2 years.
Wow.
And it is basically as it came out of the factory.
Yeah, almost unmarked. Yeah.
So, give it a rattle, see what you think.
Feels very comfortable. Yeah, I like that.
I did think you might, and actually I have, as an extra bonus, here is the home plate version of it.
Of the same material?
Yep.
Slightly thinner.
And that was a custom job for me, because he doesn't normally do home plate. Very different experience.
Sounds so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
This is a Valley Mediator, as they are called. He is based in France, so you can hold it whatever way, but I would suggest holding it that way around and have the long bit on the inside. I think
That is your picking
Yeah.
surface.
I mean, you can use
Yeah,
either,
yeah.
but it's very like potent and muscular. So
Feels very nice.
yeah, it's a lovely finish. Yeah, but he specialises in bone, horn, keeping it in the natural world. This is a Howling Monkey Antonius, and these are made entirely from
It's not
Tago.
made of monkey.
It's sadly not. It's not. Made
No,
of monkey.
good.
But it's all Tago all the time.
Right, yeah, okay.
And this originated as a custom order for a guy called Antonius in Greece, and then Brian added it to his line after that. And it was the first pick that I reviewed on Heavy Ripping back in the day that got full marks when I still used to use a rating system, because I just think it's fab.
And what's with the sort of shaping? Is that for anything other than comfort, or?
So this is what the guy asked for, and he wanted this kind of like for it to look basically like an old key.
Oh yeah, okay.
That is a traditional Howling Monkey fatty, which is exactly the same material, just different shape. So same company, same maker, just dyed.
Yeah, I was going to ask how they got the colour.
Yeah, well, because Tago is quite porous, it will take
colour.
It'll take dye, no bother. And he puts pistol grips on them as well.
It feels really nice, actually.
Moving on to these items here. This is a Mako Jumbo. These are made in Albuquerque. He made me 3 of these. I've got a red one as well, and a white one. That's the red one, which is a little bit smaller. This big boy here, this is a 10mm job.
Yeah, it's huge.
Now, the way to hold this, because it is initially quite confusing, is either you can hold it that way, but you will find it much more comfortable if you hold it with that section inside and have that there.
Right, yeah.
Because then it's like, and that is resin.
So sorry, that is your picking surface?
Yeah, I would have it like that.
Gosh, that feels really different.
It'll feel super weird to
Yeah.
begin with, but like, not if you just relax everything, and it'll be much more enjoyable.
Yeah, very different again.
Well,
Nice sound.
I also have this, which is a Depic Argentina Virtuoso. Now, these are made by a guy called Gabriel Wagnerman, who is a scary gypsy jazz player. He's one of those guys. And he plays with his thumb like really far forward. Like that. The idea behind this is that if you want to play fingerstyle,
Yeah,
you flick
yeah,
it up,
yeah.
you do your thing, then you put it back around, you do it. this is what I would describe as the outer reaches of the plectroverse.
Yeah, okay.
So this is when you're getting into, because this is like a 4-piece assembly with screws. Put the ring over your index finger and then grip it like you normally would. What you will find is that the hole tends to sit at the inverse knuckle of your thumb, because that's how he holds it. Most of us would hold it with our pad in there, but just see how you get on with it, really.
God, it feels so different.
It's going to be really strange.
That's really weird.
But you hear how dark the sound is going in.
Yeah.
Because it's for that gypsy thing. They want it to be like muted and beefy and, you know.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I'm nowhere near a good enough player to get my head around that, probably, but I understand the principle of it. It does sort of make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. He does some wild stuff. Like, what he does when you buy these is that you get a ring measurement of your index finger,
yeah, okay.
and then he sends you extra rings, because obviously everyone is different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what he'll do is he'll send you usually 2 rings. Just one that's slightly bigger, one that's slightly smaller, to see which one works for you. That one there, that is a soft elastomer, so it's actually rubber.
Oh, wow. Oh, right, that's not
Yeah.
what I was expecting. We used to sell ones, I think maybe, no, not Vi, but one of the other signature artists might use a big...
They were the 346, which is that shape, is the most common shape in Japan.
Right.
They're really mad for it for some reason. But yeah, it's that one's made of kind of like a vulcanized rubber.
And does it sound quite dull?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more like it's like the old funk sort of Motown chop.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Like the attack's really soft, and they go up to about 2mm.
Yeah.
The 2mm one is amazing. Sounds super weird, but in a good way.
What about these sort of skeleton ones?
Now, I was really hoping at this juncture that you would pick that out, right? So, that is a Zufoi Rost. And these are the ones that I always try and talk about in every time I do one of these videos. So, Malte Sadler, God rest his soul, was a young German architect and massive snooker enthusiast who started making his own picks. And he designed the Rost specifically to be used for funk. So the only person I've ever seen playing one of those was Nile Rodgers.
Wow.
Who had a couple, but obviously they are incredibly fragile. So
That's what I was
if you
thinking.
play really hard, they'll just break.
Yeah.
But they were all injection molded, and he did. There's a couple of other ones in here. So I was speaking to him right up until he died. He got very, very ill, and we were conversing while he was still in hospital. And sadly, he is no longer with us. But I managed to get a whole load of pics from him before that happened. These were his 3 main models, which is the Daub, the Pick, and the Nap. And these are all made of rubber as well. This one, which is his Go, this set me on this path, basically.
Right.
Because I was so taken aback by somebody being that far outside of the norm. And it was the first pick I played where I really did feel like myself as a player. But he did them in 3 versions. He did this one is graphene, or graphite, sorry I should say. Then he did one in black Ultex, which I think I've got in here as well. Yeah, that's the black Ultex one. And then he did a yellow Ultex, but nobody's got any of them. I can't track them down anywhere because his mother took over the company, but after he died. But she was just kind of letting it run its course. So, which is a shame because I don't know anybody that's got yellow ones of these. I know Joe Macy had them, but he's also no longer with us. So, but I brought you because I'm a generous, loving man. These, have I got both of them? No, I've just got the one. Right, so this one here, this is the Moon, and that was handmade by him, and it was never released to the public. So there's only one of those, and I've got it.
Wow.
And it is one of my favourite shapes. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's peak, like polyether, ether, ketone. It certainly looks like that, but I'm not 100% sure. So very, very cool, and as rare as they come.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of in your world a bit of history, isn't it?
Rest in peace, dear friend. Wonderful. So, you've had a good old rummage today, and had your mind widened from the sound of things.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what's your big takeaway from this?
I think the big takeaway is how not weird most of them feel. Because when you look at them, it's like, it's like looking at I can't think of an analogy for a guitar that's got, some kind of mad new tremolo system or something, and you're like, you don't know how it's going to feel in your hands, or but actually the majority of them feel very natural to play, very comfortable to hold. They definitely all sound great and sound different depending on the materials. Really eye-opening.
Oh, I'm very glad to have had the experience with you, and also for you to have taken the time and to get it, because that's not universal. Some people come in and go, "Oh, isn't this crazy?" and then go away. But like, if you really experience the thing and you understand where it's coming from, then I think that helps. Yeah. And the thing I'm really interested to know is when you covered a lot of ground here, and you've been in the sort of the lower end of the boutique side, all the way up to the top end with your Killys and your Hufschmids and all that. So when you go back to your own picks, how does it compare? Because nothing is wrong here. It's just a question of how you're experiencing it.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting that the first thing you notice going back to the normal one is how clicky it is. Which I suppose the thickness side of it could be desirable for some kinds of strumming and whatnot, but I quite like the sound of the thicker ones, the way they attack the string sort of slightly differently. I don't know, it'd be really interesting. Obviously, you're here, camera's here, I'm like not super comfortable with my own guitar playing, but like at home or left to my own devices, it would be really interesting to see how I adapt to the different styles and shapes, and I quite look forward to that actually.
Well, I am absolutely thrilled to have had you on. I rest my case.
Thank you. And
it's been lovely to come and visit the workshop.
Oh, thanks.
And for giving me an opportunity to play your Argonaut and things. So massive thanks to you. I'll put all the links to Seth's activity in the description, though if you're here you've probably been to his page already, but that's absolutely fine. And I'll make a wee note of all the ones you tried and all the rest of it.
Awesome.
So, huge thanks.
No, thank you, John.
Oh, it's a pleasure indeed. Right, well, massive thanks to Seth for his time today, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of I Rest My Case. If not, I'm not sure how you got to the end, but that's totally fine. So I will see you in due course, but from myself, John Davidson, and from Heavy Repping, many thanks. Just remember, if you're not sure what to do in life, rep hard, rep heavy, and I'll see you soon.